Seated. Good morning.
Good morning.
In Jonathan Franzen's new book, Crossroads, the protagonist, Russ, is a pastor in crisis. The source of his bitter antipathy is Ambrose, the director of a very popular youth group at Russ's church. Russ's grudge against the much-admired Ambrose has bloomed over 3 years into an obsessive hatred. In this scene, Russ and Ambrose have a literal come-to-Jesus moment. They have aired their grievances, and Russ has not held back from expressing the feelings that he's been harboring for years. Ambrose asks him to wait a moment while he goes and gets a water basin. When he returns, Russ, to his horror, realizes that Ambrose means to wash his feet. This is an excruciating moment for Russ, who is at the peak of discomfort and refusal. But he's kept seated by Ambrose, who says he's praying, if not for Russ, then for himself. Franzen writes, Russ knew better than to pray his way out of hatred. He tried it 100 times to no avail. What moved him now was the hand that was grasping his. It was slender, black-haired, still youthful. It was just a human hand, a young man's hand, and it reminded him of his son's, and his chest began to shake. Ambrose tightened his grip, and Russ surrendered to his weakness. He must have wept for 10 minutes. With Ambrose kneeling at his feet. I found this passage very moving and difficult to read. I mean, you're reading along and you think, oh gosh, they're really going to do this. How uncomfortable. And then the hand, the touch, the insistence, the human-to-human contact. It's finally there that the release of the vitriol, which has consumed Russ for years, happens. Reflecting on the readings today, and they were meaty ones at that, the scene came to mind because it reminded me of the reconciliation between Joseph and his brothers. What struck me about the pairing of Joseph from the Old Testament reading and the well-known passage from Luke today is that to find our way to a place where Jesus says, love our enemies, we must engage in the work of reconciliation, facing the truth of what has happened before we can move then on to forgive and love those who have hurt us. Bear with me a moment while I just review Joseph's backstory. His brothers are jealous of his relationship with his father Jacob, who has become incensed. They become incensed when the 17-year-old Joseph, the younger of the brothers, one of the younger, tells him about his dreams in which his brothers pay him homage. Maybe not the wisest of moves. And in their plot against him, they refrain from killing him, but sell him into slavery. Joseph comes into a household of Pharaoh in Egypt, where the Lord looks upon him with great favor multiple times. And then he has his ups and downs. His ability to interpret dreams curries favor with Pharaoh, and he makes him steward of all that he has, second only to Pharaoh himself. And now, at 30, his brothers do indeed come to him for grain as there is famine throughout the world. We know his brothers don't recognize him, but Joseph recognizes his brothers. There are hints of guilt, self-recrimination, and suffering throughout this story. Joseph tests his brothers to see if they have remorse and how they've treated him by telling them that they must bring him Benjamin, Joseph's full brother and the much-beloved youngest son of Jacob. Before they leave Egypt to go home to get their brother, they speak amongst themselves, believing that Joseph cannot understand. They say, alas, we are paying the penalty for what we did to our brother. We saw his anguish when he pleaded with us, but would not listen. That is why this anguish has come upon us. In chapter 42, Joseph's brother Reuben says to the others, did I not tell you not to wrong the boy? But you would not listen. And so now he comes. There comes a reckoning for his blood. Judah offers himself as a substitute, a scapegoat for Benjamin. Unbeknownst to his brothers, Joseph has understood all that has been said, and he cannot stand it anymore and reveals himself. In today's passage, his brothers are very shocked and dismayed at his presence. This sequence of need, guilt, atonement, reconciliation, and promise is not the fast track to forgiveness. It is a process, one that concludes with touch and tears and holding and conversation. We read Joseph kissed all his brothers and wept upon them, and after that his brothers talked with him. I wonder if we can get to this kind of true cathartic event without the tests and the trials that precede it. As we've been exploring Black history this month, I'd like to surface a quote I recently heard from a lecture that was given by Diana Butler Bass at General Theological Seminary last week. Matt was there. As a historian, she's deeply concerned with the truth of the Episcopal Church in America. Her project is to dismantle the myth of the church and remind us that, like Joseph's brothers, we are at times complicit in our nation's complex racial past. In seeking to relieve ourselves of shame of speaking about the honesty of our history, we rush past it, ready to move on without a backward glance. She quoted the great W.E.B. Du Bois, who in 1935 wrote this: "It was therefore soon conceived that it was neither wise nor patriotic to speak of all the causes of that strife. We minimize the slavery controversy, and on top of that, pass by Reconstruction with a phrase of regret or disgust. Are these reasons of courtesy sufficient for denying truth? How do we move on with those who have embarrassed or hurt us?" The recently deceased Bishop Desmond Tutu introduced the world to Ubuntu theology. The concept comes from the Zulu phrase, Amuntu, Negamuntu, Negabantu. I hope nobody speaks Zulu here. I don't know. Which literally means that a person is a person through other people. Another translation is, do you speak Zulu? We'll have to talk. I'll have to talk after. I am who I am because we are. Is that fair? It is an affirmation of our humanity through the humanity of others. The Reverend Jackie Lewis put it this way: what hurts you hurts me. What heals you heals me. What causes you joy causes me to rejoice. What makes you sad also makes me weep. What is forgiveness? Is it really turning the other cheek when you have been slapped? Should we just take it? Is that really the best way to forgiveness? In Jesus's Luke, he models a paradigm of nonviolence. Jesus gives us the commandment, but it's not so easy. The Joseph story shows us the years it has taken for he and his brothers to be reconciled. It is a process, but it is a process that has gravitas and lasting effect. It is not cheap grace. I think we must feel the slap and the tears and the embrace. Jesus gives us a high bar, the gold standard for altruism and agapic love, but does not tell us how to get there. For that, we need Joseph and his brothers. We need Du Bois. We need Desmond Tutu, Martin Luther King. Those who have had their faces slapped and who have felt the sting and insisted that we too know how it feels because we too are human beings. We too are children of God who have been hurt and shamed. When we see ourselves bound to one another, it is then we will be healed. As Jesus reminds us, the measure you give will be the measure you get back.